Welcome back to another lesson. This is Domain 2, Lesson 13 with Mrs. Taranjo at the Citizenship Academy. We're doing Myths of the Aztec and Inca. Our objectives are to identify and explain the similarities and differences between the Aztec and Inca myths, and also we're going to be working on editing our paragraphs for our Codex project. Our key vocabulary for today: engulf, to surround or cover completely; navigable, deep and wide enough for ships to pass through; emerge, to come into view; recede, to move back; staff, a pole or rod used as a sign of authority or as support when walking; suitable, having the right qualities; and pierce, to make a hole in something. Our purpose for reading today is to listen to and read myths to find similarities and differences in the way the Aztec and the Inca explain the beginning of their cultures. And the big question is, how did the Aztec and Inca explain the creation of their land and people? This is our pronunciation table. We understand that this is very tricky because a lot of them are names. So if at any time you're reading the chapter and need help pronouncing anything, you can refer back to this page and it'll help you out. Just do your best as you're reading. Okay, now we're going to read Chapter 9, Myths of the Aztec and the Inca. Feel free to pause the video at any time to read through something carefully to make sure you're understanding the text. Okay, our word work for today is suitable. In this Inca settlement story, you read that the sun god told Manco Capac and Mama Aclo to search for a suitable spot to start a new nation for people. So suitable means having the right qualities. It's almost like the just right spot. And the part of speech is an adjective. Okay, so this is the paragraph that I modeled at the very beginning of this unit. And the reason I have this posted here is because we're going to be practicing how to edit a paragraph using a checklist. So this is the paragraph that I had already written and modeled for you early on. So Mesoamerica, home of the Maya civilization, has interesting and diverse geographical features located north of the equator in the tropics. The Maya lands include part of Mexico and parts of Central America. Types of land including lowlands, mountains, coasts, and rainforests. Even though the region is surrounded by water, some areas are drier than others. The land on which the Maya civilization grew is a full variety, with different kinds of lands, plants, and animals. So as I was reading this, there was a lot of grammatical errors. There were some commas that were missing, some periods that were missing. There were some words that weren't capitalized properly. There was run-on sentences. There was a lot of mistakes. And the reason that we do this edit is we want to make our writing stronger by fixing these mistakes now. Now, when we're doing our draft, those things don't really matter because we're just trying to get our thoughts organized and put into one thought. One way we can look at this is by using a checklist. So this is an example of a checklist that we're actually going to use when you're editing your 3 paragraphs. So all my sentences have a subject and predicate. Remember, we talked about that. The subject is who's it about, and the predicate is what happened based on that. I included all the words I wanted to write. Did you have everything you wanted? I took out repeated words or information. I have checked how long my sentences are and split run-on sentences into 2. My linking words appropriately convey, compare, or contrast. So let's look at, I've checked how long my sentences are and split the run-on sentences into 2. So right here is actually an example of a run-on sentence. Mesoamerica, home of the Maya civilization, has interesting and diverse geographical features. Right here is where I would put a period and start the next sentence. Located north of the equator in the tropics, the Maya lands include part of Mexico and parts of Central America. So that whole thing was an example of a run-on sentence. So when I'm editing, I'm going to start by changing that and put a period here and make this an uppercase letter to start the next sentence. Once I've done that, I can go back to my checklist and put a check. And that tells me, okay, I've done that, I fixed that. Now, if you have more than one of those, read through everything more than one time and fix any other ones that you might find. The next thing we're going to look at is format. Are all my paragraphs indented? Now, with this one, I only had one paragraph, so we don't have to worry too much about that. I have a title on the front, which, as you can tell, I didn't have one. So for this one, I would actually create a title. Each codex page has a heading. Each page has an image, and then there's a reference list on the back in the format I was taught. So for your codex project, you're going to have your paragraph, your picture, and your caption on one side of the paper, and on the back you're going to have your reference list. Where did you get your pictures from, and information such as that. And remember, you can use your reader as an example of a reference, so that's really important to include as well. So once you have all those things and you think you have it all, you're going to check mark those as well. Capitals. I begin each sentence with a capital, and I use capital letters for all pronouns. In this, I saw that this Maya wasn't capitalized, and we know that Maya is a proper noun, so we know that should have been capitalized. Mexico is a place. That should be capitalized. For the most part, it looks like the capitals are in the right spot, but keep in mind that if you notice that if it's a proper noun or at the beginning of a sentence, it should have a capital letter. So remember I said when I changed this to two sentences, it was a run-on sentence? I said I put a period here, but I have to uppercase the next letter or capitalize because it's a new sentence. For the beginning of a sentence, should always have an uppercase letter. So once I have that, I can check those off. Next, I've checked spelling, and if any spelling is really wrong, obviously since the teacher isn't right there with you to edit it, you can always look online and see if something is spelled correctly. So from this paragraph, civilization, I can actually look in my reader and up here and notice that these are not spelled right. So this is actually a misspelled one. This is correct. You can always refer back to your text and say, I remember them saying the word civilization, and you can correct that spelling error. So then once that's done, we can check that off. I read my piece aloud to check for commas at pauses and periods, question marks, exclamation points, and at the end of my sentences. I use comma, quotation marks, and apostrophes in places where they belong, and the titles in my reference list are underlined or italics. So when you have a title that you got your picture from, it should be underlined. The titles are always underlined. But looking here, I told you that I did notice some errors with that. So types of lands include lowlands, mountains, coasts, and rainforests. Right here would be another comma, even though the region is, or actually, I apologize, it's actually the end of another sentence. Types of lands include lowlands, mountains, coasts, and rainforests, period. New sentence, so this needs to be capitalized. Even though the region is surrounded by water, some areas are drier than others. The land on which the Mayan civilization grew is full of variety, with different kinds of land, plants, and animals. Well, that doesn't make sense. Right here should not have been a full period. This should have been a comma, which means this should be lowercase because it's not the end of a sentence or the beginning of a sentence, and the rest should just finish it out. So this should all be one sentence. So when you are going through your paragraph, this is the checklist that you're going to use in order to make sure that you have made your writing perfect. Now you're going to do this with all three of your paragraphs. You have your Inca, your Aztec, and your Mayan paragraph. All of them need to have been edited using this checklist. Now, once you are done with that and you have edited it perfectly the way you wanted it, now you can assemble your codex project. Remember, your codex project should be a piece of paper. It could be, you can make it like a book too if that's easier for you. But one page should be all about the Mayans, one page should all be about Aztec, and one should be about Inca. You should include your corrected final paragraph, the picture that you chose, and the caption that goes along with it on one side. On the back of that, you should have your reference list. We've gone through what the reference list is. It should include where you got your information, so title of that, the date that it was posted, and what kind of, where did you get it? Was it a book or was it a website? You have to do that for each of the pages. So Aztec should have their own paragraph, a caption, image. On the back should be the reference list for that one. Inca should have an Inca paragraph, Inca image and caption, and on the back have the references for that one. That would show us a complete Codex project. This has been shown throughout this Codex project. So if at any time when you have your final project, I would recommend going through your entire project and checking and making sure you have included what you needed to include in your Codex project. It's very important because, again, this is how you're assessed. So your final Codex project will be submitted for your assessment for today. So it's very important that you follow those steps by editing your paragraphs, then assembling your Codex project. When your Codex project is finalized and done, and you have done everything you're supposed to with it, then you're going to submit that to your teacher. And we will see everyone in the next lesson.